Hi chickens, I hope you're all doing well. It's the middle of the week. I hope the week is treating you all nicely. Hope you're all looking forward to the weekend and have some great plans for the weekend. I've been thinking about being an empath and what the word empath actually means, and whether or not I myself could be categorised as an empath, because obviously being a part of the pagan community for so long, the word empath is kind of a descriptor that I've seen thrown around, obviously, and there are a lot of people in the pagan community, the witchcraft community, the psychic community, who refer to themselves as such, and it's never been a descriptor that I've given to myself, but it's always one that I've been interested in because I do consider myself as a deeply empathetic and compassionate person, and being a tarot reader for 14 years, I would hope this is true, that I am very intuitive and I kind of rely upon my intuition to find my feet in certain situations, particularly where other people and their emotions are involved. And so I was kind of thinking about, obviously I've never considered the idea of being an empath as a way of being that's entirely pleasant. I completely understand that on the one hand, you're able to pick up on all of these wonderful positive emotions and kind of posit them into your own emotional bank, if you see what I mean. But I also understand that the other side of that coin is that you can pick up on a lot of people's negativity and anger and aggression, and that can kind of penetrate very deeply too. And I was also wondering where the line is, and I'm wondering what you guys think of this. I'm wondering where the line is between just being a deeply empathetic person who's very in touch with their intuition and kind of gets where people are coming from, and then being in that much more narrow category of being an empath, which is kind of somewhat of a speciality that you kind of attribute to yourself or assign to yourself. I was wondering if it's possible to understand where that line is drawn between being one kind of person, having this intuitive personality that absorbs emotions like a sponge, and then kind of going over that line into empath territory and kind of embracing that word to describe yourself. So that was something that interested me. So I started doing a little bit of looking around online to try and find some lists of attributes or traits or, characteristics, behaviours that may suggest that you are an empath, kind of like a textbook empath, because I've never really been sure. And I came across this website with this article on it by a woman called Dr. Judith Orloff, who wrote a book called Emotional Freedom: Liberate Yourself from Negative Emotions and Transform Your Life. I don't know what kind of a doctor she is exactly, I'm going to admit that. I didn't actually do a great deal of looking into her background, but I found this quiz that she did that she claimed can help you identify if you're an empath. She said that if you get 3 or more of the answers to the quiz as a yes, then you are probably standing on empath territory. And if you get below 3, but you do get 2 or 3, then you are kind of you have some part of an empath in you, I suppose you could say. And I found some of these things that she wrote in the quiz very specific and obvious, and then I found others very broad and probably not really much of a sign at all that you're an empath. But like I said, I'm coming at it from a very new place. I don't term myself an empath particularly, so I don't know if there are empaths out there watching this who maybe want to add their 2 cents to the debate, because that would be great from where I'm coming from, because I'm not really sure. So basically she said that if you answer 3 or more to the following questions, then you are probably an empath, at least in part. So, have you been labelled too emotional or overly sensitive? If a friend is distraught, do you start feeling it too? Are your feelings easily hurt? Are you emotionally drained by crowds and require time alone to revive? Do your nerves get frayed by noises, smells, or excessive talk? Do you prefer taking your own car to places so that you can leave when you please? Do you overeat to cope with emotional stress? Are you afraid of being engulfed in intimate relationships? So these are the questions from the quiz that that was featured in this article online, that basically she said could help you to determine whether or not you are an empath or have some empathic quality. So I'm just going to go through them briefly and kind of talk a little bit about my reactions to each question as a way of kind of surmising for myself whether or not I may be termed an empath. And I think sometimes an empath is just a list of things, is just one thing, sorry, in a list of things that you may come to recognise that you are through also being deeply spiritual, or through being a witch, or through doing tarot readings like I do to help people with their own sense of self-exploration. And in fact, potentially it's the tarot readings that I've done over the years that could have actually invested me with my empathic quality, or allowed me to get in touch with it if indeed I am an empath, I suppose. But again, like I said, I don't know where that line is drawn. In a lot of ways, I think that a lot of these things in this list that Judith Orloff has written kind of just pertain to a personality type, don't they? I mean, a lot of people have that kind of thing who do not have access to the word empath in their vocabulary and don't know that these people exist who call themselves empaths. So they, by definition, would not categorise as an empath because they're not aware in their consciousness that some of their personality traits pertain to the word's meaning. So it's kind of like this very exclusive little descriptor that people in the New Age community, the pagan community, can adopt as a moniker. But is it really just a sign of certain personality traits that, of course, spiritual people would have? That's kind of the point I'm making. So I'll go through these now just sort of from my point of view. Firstly, have you been labelled too emotional or overly sensitive? No. But the thing is, you know, I am labelled as somebody who's very in touch with their emotional spectrum and who is very compassionate, very empathetic, very, you know, I cry at the news, I'm very concerned with current affairs, I was very politically active for a very long time, I care about the human plight, and on a more personal level, I am kind of the listening ear, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will know what I mean when they say that. I'm the listening ear for my friend group. I'm quite a lot of the time the person that is known to bring good counsel to the table, but also not be judgmental and not try to make anybody go in the direction that I feel is right for them, but actually in a sense just to let them have their time. So I suppose in that sense I've been labelled emotionally intelligent. What I haven't been labelled is overly emotional or overly sensitive, too emotional, too weepy, too all over the place. But to be honest with you, when I think about people that might be labelled too emotional, or overly sensitive, I don't necessarily think that's the trait of an empath particularly. I don't see how it can be, because I think that a lot of people that I've met who I would term overly sensitive or too emotional are people that actually aren't in control of their emotions for other reasons. It's not that they, feel the emotional weight of everybody else around them coming down on them. In fact, often people who are overtly sensitive and too emotional and kind of very wrapped up in their emotional spectrum are actually the opposite of empaths. They're people who don't actually feel deeply other people's pain or don't see other people's perspective. They're actually narcissists. And that's why their emotions can be so kind of like all over the place, and they can be so kind of involved in their own thing that's happening and be very kind of unaware of the perspective of other people, or they may have very little perspective about their own lives. And that's kind of not something that I've ever considered to be the quality of an empath. I kind of see empaths as probably having a great deal more perspective than the average bear, by virtue of the fact that they are constantly in touch with other people's emotional spectrums and such. So I kind of see them as probably being more zen and more able to appreciate the perspective of others, more diplomatic and more able to rein their emotions in, control their responses to their emotions and such. So I kind of found that first one a little bit weird. Have you ever been labelled too emotional or overly sensitive? Because I think there are a great many other reasons why somebody may be termed such, and I think some of those reasons are probably far more in line with narcissism than they are in line with kind of a very overt or overwhelming sense of empathy with others. The next one, if a friend is distraught, do you start feeling it too? Yes, absolutely. That's a long-standing thing with me. A friend rang me up a couple of months ago. He just very immediately before the phone call suffered an unexpected bereavement. He was weeping uncontrollably, and as soon as I heard his voice, I broke down. I was panicking, I was shaking, because I really felt that something had happened to him, and immediately then it had happened to me. As soon as his voice came down the phone, my energy level just changed, and I took on and absorbed his pain because I love him. And that's happened with a lot of my friends. Recently, I've had a friend in my life who is very unhappy with what she's doing for work. She's a very creative person. She has qualifications that would enable her to gain entry into the creative sphere, but she feels unable to go there. She's scared of rejection. Her ego is very fragile when it comes to her abilities. And I've really felt for her, and I've really tried to help her. I've really tried to bolster her confidence and help her to move forward, because I feel the pain of her dissatisfaction very deeply. Again, not sure if this is particularly... It is empathic, obviously, because we're talking about the definition of empath is somebody who feels other people's emotions and takes on those people's emotions. So obviously it's empathic, but it's also the sign of being a very good friend and having great long-standing, long-lasting relationships with your friends. So evidently it's not always a sign of being an empath, but I do appreciate what this doctor is saying, that it needs to be kind of 3 or more yeses to get you to empath status, or empath entry level, shall we say. The third one, are your feelings easily hurt? Yes. Aren't these questions a bit difficult and abstract? If you're watching this video, I hope that you ask yourself these questions as well, whether you're an empath or not, because they've actually made me think quite a lot, and little parts of my shadow aspect are crying out like, don't tell them that your feelings are easily hurt, don't admit that, it's weak. But the other part of myself is going, shut up, shadow, you're integrating, I'm integrating you with me. I'm going to accept that yes, my feelings are easily hurt. So I'm kind of having a bit of a battle with myself inside about this question. My feelings are easily hurt, but I, at the same time, am also, I feel, very able to realise that I am mirroring when I'm mirroring, or that I'm allowing somebody else's point of view to harm my perception of myself when that's not necessary. And I also feel that even though criticism hurts me and criticism makes me feel unstable or unbalanced or a bit like, oh God, I'm being criticised, I must get defensive, I feel that I've managed to maintain inside me a very, very clear notion that anything that upsets me, that somebody says to me or about me to somebody else, is something that I can use to help myself grow. I don't necessarily have to stop at upset or stop at anger or stop at feeling completely affronted and offended. I can go on into the next phase of the territory, which is using what's been said about me to turn that in on myself and say, okay, why does it bother you so much that that person thinks that about you or has said that about you or hasn't been the friend to you that you thought they should be? Why does that bother you? Is it because there is some deep part of your psyche that kind of knows that there are issues in that way that you need to deal with? So my mum always used to say that to me as well. She used to say, you know, if you get criticism or your feelings feel hurt or you feel undervalued, look at what you are not addressing within yourself. It's very easy to turn all of your issues outwards. But it's like Jungian dream theory, you know, where Jung says that everything in the dream is actually about you. If you have a dream about your partner, it's not necessarily about your partner. It's your dream and it's about you. And your partner in your dream is a representation of the part of you that you are perhaps not coming into contact with fully. So I like that idea that, you know, if somebody projects onto you their ideas of you from their perspective, you can use it to kind of integrate into your own feelings about yourself and use it to strengthen you. And I think maybe in a lot of ways that's a more empathic quality. I kind of feel that a lot of these questions they're presenting me with the idea of somebody who is oversensitive to the point of narcissism or weakness and who doesn't want to look at what's wrong with them. That's how I feel. When I read this third question, are your feelings easily hurt? I think to myself, but how is that strictly an empathic quality? Doesn't that just necessarily mean that you don't have a strong enough idea of who you are and you don't have strong enough self-love to kind of counterbalance the negativity that somebody might put towards you for your character or your behaviour or whatever? So I'm not necessarily sure it's particularly empathic per se to have your feelings easily hurt. I think, again, like with the first question about oversensitivity, there can be other reasons, and those reasons are not always positive and great and to do with being an empath. Are you emotionally drained by crowds and require time alone to revive? Definitely. I'm not the kind of person that always wants to be around people. I do take on people's shit. I do kind of very deeply absorb myself into what other people are feeling. When people are in conflict, I can often see and feel both sides of the coin. I'm not the kind of person that wants to be partying constantly. I'm a massive, massive party head. That's true. But there comes a time where I need to go away. Like, for example, I could go to an all-night rave with my mates, but I wouldn't want to go back to somebody's house afterwards to talk for ages and then go on to somebody else's house and have dinner. There's a time where I need to get away. And that time needs to be about silence. It needs to be about reconnecting with my core. It needs to be about spirituality, about reading, about amassing knowledge. I really do need to be alone and I need to get back to myself. I always need to get back to myself. That's what I'm like. I like to have a base, and the base is my core being. And if I'm out of touch with it for too long, I can feel very stressed out. And I'm very stressed out by group dynamics quite a lot of the time. I'm not what you would say an anxious person. And I'm not easily kind of prone to panic attacks. I'm not shy. I'm quite a sociable butterfly, really. but I have a limit, and that limit, when it is reached, needs to be addressed immediately without question, or I can get very, very stressed out. I need to be with me, if you see what I mean. And yeah, I do very much absorb the energy fields of other people. I'm sure I do, because I can actually feel it happening to me physically. So that, I would say, definitely I agree with. But let's just say, if we were going to question the other side of the coin, though, that I think a lot of people who are in touch with themselves spiritually, whether they are particularly hugely empathic or not, will want that time alone to reconnect, because spirituality is so often about silence and about committing to your path and coming back to yourself and who you are. Also, I don't know about anyone else, but I have in the past suffered from a few issues, mental health issues and such, and I now feel that it is imperative to my sense of emotional well-being that I check in with myself, and that requires for me to be alone. Do your nerves get frayed by noises, smells, or excessive talk? Okay, so if there are empaths out there watching this video, I had no idea that kind of like noises and smells and things were part of being an empath. I've read that on a few different websites now, doing this research tonight, that kind of the smell of really strong perfume can get in the way of your capacity to be able to think or do things, and like loud, jarring noises or unexpected noises can be very disconcerting and uncomfortable. I didn't realise that was part of what being an empath was all about. Again, it could just be something to do with specific personality traits, and maybe in the end the word empath is neither here nor there. You're either that kind of person or you're not that kind of person, and that's what I'm essentially trying to work out here as an exercise. But definitely I am bothered by jarring noises and excessive talk, and maybe not so much by smells, but jarring noises, yes. A woman was making a jarring noise with some kind of bloody office toy horn football thing today, and it bothered me to the point where I had to say something. I said, look, that's really bothering me. It's jarring, and every time she did it, it was unpredictable, and she found it very funny and amusing, and I didn't understand why. It was really disconcerting for me, and I get that a lot. There are certain noises that I just can't bear. Straight away, as soon as I hear them, I can't bear them. I'm like, ugh, that's horrible. I think a lot of people are like that with nails down a blackboard, but I have that with like a lot of other stuff that can't really be explained. It's just jarring and unnerving. And excessive talk as well, sometimes when I feel it's not particularly going anywhere, or it doesn't make any sense, or I don't know. But I'm also very fascinated by sound too, and I immerse myself in sound. I enjoy the sounds that make me uncomfortable, if that makes any sense. I'm very interested in the human experience, and in the idea that sound is a form of consciousness. That whole idea of, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? That whole thing, I'm really interested in that. I'm interested in the idea that we believe that the truth is the truth, but really it's just our conscious human perception of the truth. We don't know what it would look like if we weren't here to observe it. So that kind of interests me. Do you prefer taking your own car to places so you can leave when you please? I don't drive, so that's not kind of really relevant to me. But yes, I do like to leave when I want to leave. Again, like I said before, I have this time in me where I know I need to get out and just be with myself. And I know that the time to be with people has passed. And I'm very, very strict about when that time ends, it's ended. I need to get out, kind of thing. And I'm kind of very stringent about that. There isn't really a lot of room for manoeuvre. Do you overeat to cope with emotional stress? Again, overeating or undereating, or any emotional issue which you invest into the idea of food, is about a lot more of a broad spectrum than just merely whether or not you're an empath. And as somebody who in the past has had some issues with food, I would say that would be important to state that often those things come from a very, very deep place, which have got nothing really to do with your ability to feel other people's emotions or not. They're about your relationship with your own emotions and your own past and your own sense of who you are. So I do think that's kind of a dangerous leading question as well for a quiz about whether or not you're an empath, because there are a lot of other issues there. I don't overeat to cope with emotional stress. However, I do undereat to cope with emotional stress. It's a habit. If I'm depressed, if I'm stressed, the likelihood is that my appetite will be consciously repressed in some way. I do lose a lot of weight when I'm heartbroken, or when I feel lost and things like that. I maintain a steady weight when I generally feel content and right in myself. The last one, are you afraid of being engulfed in intimate relationships? This one's weird, because I would have thought if you are an empath that you actually are more drawn to intimate relationships, and actually probably your emotional relationships could become sometimes quite all consuming because you are so empathetic, you're so intuitive, you're so in line with what the other person is thinking and feeling as well as what you're feeling. So it's kind of strange to me that she might be saying that for her part she believes that empaths are commitment phobes. That's what it kind of states to me. Are you afraid of being engulfed in intimate relationships? That kind of the sense that I got from that really was that she's trying to say that empaths like to shy away from intimate, all-consuming, life-changing connections with people. So that was weird. But I think also, if you're an empath and you know it, and you've been an empath for a long time, and you have to put certain measures into place to help yourself deal with the downsides of being an empath, then you probably will feel quite concerned about who you spend time with. You will probably check yourself before you wreck yourself in a lot of ways with regard to who comes into your life. And that, for me, in a sense, is true. I do kind of take on other people's problems. I take on other people's emotions and the energy field they surround themselves with. The level at which they hold their vibration is, it's not easily transferable to me because I feel quite strong in my core being. So it's not as if I'm easily swayed to hover at somebody else's vibrational frequency. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that I'm aware of it. I'm aware of it constantly, constantly, constantly. And it has led me to draw away from people. Definitely. But I wouldn't say that it's a fear of having intimate or significant relationships. It's just a way of protecting myself. You know, it's a little bit of a form of self-preservation, if you like. And I think it comes from actually more of an intellectual place than it would from this kind of overwhelming fear of I'm going to get dragged in, I'm going to get dragged into love, or I'm going to get dragged into obligation because this friendship is so all-consuming. It's not really that, actually. It's more of an intellectual knowledge of myself where I go, you know what you're like when you're around people that are consistently negative like that, in that way. You know, you tend to feel it all the time, and even though you try and keep your vibration high, you can never seem to really, you know, positively identify always with your own vibration. You're always letting that come onto you and bother you and bite you in the arse. So best kind of maintain your distance from that person, kind of thing. So I suppose, yeah, I do that in a sense. And another thing I wanted to say was that this woman, Judith Orloff, said that being an empath allows you the sublime capacity to absorb positive emotions, but that the negative side of it, the downside, is that you can become an angst-sucking sponge. So, and I guess I kind of think that is my idea of what being an empath is probably all about. And I do feel that I have the ability to feel overjoyed at other people's joy and to revel in other people's positivity. I've always done that. I've always loved it. And I've always been drawn towards people's positivity, if you want to call it that. People's sense of emotional well-being or people's sense of awe at the universe is something that I have enjoyed for myself as though it were mine. So, you know, without that sounding too emotionally vampiric, I'm just trying to say that I can celebrate with people when it's not my cause to celebrate, because I feel their vibrational frequency is, you know, really humming a glorious tune, and I can kind of dance to it, and I've always been like that. The angst-sucking sponge thing, by the same token, I guess, to an extent, there's always this this two sides to every coin idea. And that's why I think a lot of empaths talk about ways in which they protect themselves and ways in which they kind of keep this ability slash character trait in check for them so that they don't feel that it's kind of overwhelming. And one thing that I just wanted to say before I end is that the reason that I got into this idea and started researching this idea so diligently was because a few months ago, out of absolutely nowhere, I had this mad spiritual experience, which I'll tell you about briefly now. I was sat in my office at work, which is like this really plush, open plan office. And suddenly, out of nowhere, I wasn't even thinking anything of a spiritual context. I wasn't thinking about like quantum physics or anything like that. I was just vaguely bored and, you know, maybe thinking about whether or not I was hungry or something really like mundane and prosaic. I looked up and I saw everybody's vibrational frequency in the room. I've never seen auras before. I know a few people who see auras. I know a few people who see the auras of trees and some who see the auras of people. And I've never seen auras at all. So it was different to anything I'd experienced before. And of course, you know, I've had overwhelming, astounding spiritual experiences, and I feel grateful for every last one of them. But this was different to things I've experienced before. I looked up and just really I could see people's molecules vibrating, and I could see the energy around them vibrating. And it was like, the way I can describe it is, if you've ever like looked past a candle flame, so you've got like this naked flame burning, and you look out into your further vision, and the heat from the flame makes the air appear to, like, you know, melt and weave and kind of move. That's exactly what it looked like. Everybody had that around them, you know, that naked flame air, that wobbly air that kind of makes the picture distort. Everybody had that around them, and every single sphere of this stuff that was vibrating was going at different speeds or moving in a different kind of way. And some was moving very fluid and flowing, and some was very erratic. And I saw this for, I reckon it was about a minute, actually. But I suppose memory is suspended when you're thinking about something that, you know, really made you marvel at what you were seeing, I guess. It does feel like it lasts forever, but it did last for a long time. And I was just sat there like this, just thinking, something's happening here. I'm really seeing something. And I haven't seen it since, but I think it was just really a visual representation of something that I already feel to an extent. So I don't know if any empaths wanted to chime in with their experiences or disagree or agree with anything that I've said, and you know, that would be interesting. If there are empaths out there who want to do that, I'll make sure I put empath in the title somewhere so that people can kind of see that it may or may not relate to them, and a descriptor that they use for themselves so that they can go ahead and kind of give me their ideas or give me their point of view. That would be so good, because it's really something that I'm thinking about a lot at the moment. Okay, blessed be people, and have a good evening if you're watching this evening. Yeah, much love to you all. Bye.